We want to welcome you to the Customer Success webinar series brought to you by ClientSuccess. I'm Brent Peterson, and I'm a Customer Success Strategist here at ClientSuccess. ClientSuccess is a customer success management platform that helps leaders and CSMs retain and grow their existing customer base through communication and collaboration across the customer journey. During today's webinar, we will hear from Boaz Maor, the VP of Customer Success at OpenGov and a well-respected industry veteran. Boaz has been recognized as a top innovator in customer success and was awarded the Customer Success Innovator of the Year Award in 2017 at the annual CS100 Summit. The way this award works is 3 finalists are selected by a panel of judges after presentations have been made to those judges, and the finalists are invited to present their innovation at the CS100 Summit. Boaz and the finalists did make their presentations, and the summit attendees voted confidentially for the Innovator of the Year. And we are pleased to be able to hear from Boaz as he will share his award-winning presentation with you today. So today's webinar is designed to be, thank you, Boaz. We're excited to hear from you. A couple of other things quickly. As we continue and listen to Boaz's presentation, we'd encourage you to use the Q&A feature in the Zoom webinar. We will stop a couple of times to answer questions and save several questions until the end. We will also be recording this webinar, and we'll send the recording to your inbox later this week. It's my pleasure to welcome Boaz Maor, Vice President of Customer Success at OpenGov. Boaz, we're excited to hear from you.
Thank you very much, Brent. I'm very happy to be here. This has been a very interesting journey, the Customer Maturity Index, and I'd be very, very happy to share these thoughts with the audience here. The nature of a webinar like this is it tends to be very one-directional, right? I speak and people listen. I would like to encourage any and all people on the line here to make this as interactive as possible. You can submit questions through the chat function here. You can also use Twitter, the hashtag @CustomerMaturity or @CustomerMaturityIndex, or tweet using my domain @Boaz Maor, look at our website and blog post and provide comments. This is a kind of an open source, if you may, type innovation that we would like as much support and contribution from other people in order to accelerate. This whole thing started almost like a joke starts. A Kiwi and an Israeli walk into a cafe in Silicon Valley, and Ralph Whitgen and I met through LinkedIn, got onto a quick chat, decided it would be cool to exchange ideas. We met for coffee, literally in Silicon Valley, and started to talk about customer success. And we found that our views on customer success in general are very consistent. I mean, if you think about customer success, it's a profession that at its core existed for millennia, right? Ever since people started selling and people started buying, the concept of managing the customer, managing the relation, try to make customers successful has been a focus of people who sell, right? As we moved into more sophisticated world of SaaS in particular, we started to see the emergence of customer success as a profession and much more sophistication around the way we manage customers. One of the major innovations has been the concept of customer health score, right? A concept that embodies 3 main objectives. 1, identify challenges and opportunities with customers. 2, determine an action item or a potential action item to address those challenges and or those opportunities. And 3, forecast the expected outcome. Do we expect customers to grow and expand? Do we expect them to just renew? Do we expect them to churn, et cetera, et cetera? Sophisticated customers or sophisticated companies didn't just leave it at that, hey, I have a health score for my customer base. They also try to apply segmentation to their customers and therefore to their customer base And most common used segmentation methods are based on the stage. Obviously, it makes no sense to use the same health score for a customer that just brought your solution and is in the middle of the initial implementation, together with a customer that has been using you for 3 years, went through multiple renewals and expansion, and is in a completely different phase in their life cycle with you. Size is another very common segmentation criteria. The most common segmentation is between strategic versus enterprise versus mid-market. Sometimes there is segmentation based on location, right? Midwest versus the Southeast, or North America versus Asia versus Europe, etc. And some more sophisticated companies also go down all the way to segment by industry. I want to look at the health score of my retail customers separately, or vis-a-vis the health score of customers in high tech or in transportation, etc. Or maybe even the use case. Customers who use our solution for these purposes have a certain health score compared to other customers who are using us for that use case and may have a different health score. And the insight that a company gets from a health score can be quite profound. The problem is that what we found is that even with segmentation, your customer health score can be quite useless, which is realize a loaded statement. So let me give you an example. And this is a very particular one. This is what got the aha moment for Ralph and I as we were talking about this. This is a personal example. I used to be, a few years ago, the head of customer success at a startup called Mashery that did API management solutions. So let me talk to you about a couple of customers. Both of them were large enterprises, right? Over $1 billion in sales each. So from a size, if I look at segmentation, they were consistent. They were both West Coast based, so location was the same. And they both had good relationship with us for many years. So stage-wise, they are the same, right? The 3 first segmentation criteria, we're talking about the same type of customers. I can also tell you that both of them had very high usage, strong relationship, both at the management level and working people. They both had repeat expansion and both exhibited high health score, customer success satisfaction score. But then they were very different. So even though on the face of it, they were very much the same, when you peel the onion a little bit, you found that they are very different. Customer A operated out of a single office, supporting a single business, which they grew organically over the years, which meant that they had a very strong, coherent team of highly professional people. The way we interacted with them, the focus for us was on features. What they wanted to know is, can you get the service level from 99.4 to 99.5? Right? It was at that level. Can you get the execution faster? Customer B operated out of multiple offices nationwide. They grew very different, they supported very different businesses that they grew by acquisitions, which basically meant that their team had varying degrees of technology understanding, and their focus, therefore, their energy was focused on consolidating their businesses, getting alignment internally. The work with us was on helping addressing the lowest common denominator, not how do we get the SLA forward. So clearly you can see, even though on the customer health score, both of these customers were healthy, good health score, good satisfaction, repeated expansions, in reality, the health score did not give us the answer of how should we deal with them, what should we do with them, how do we drive forward and upward their success and ours from it, which led to our understanding of the maturity of those customers was the difference between us. Now, we drew on the maturity model, right? The concept of capability maturity model was invented at Carnegie Mellon University in the 1980s and has been since evolved in many different ways along many different industries. and is very common all around the world in many, many industries. In fact, I'm willing to bet that each and every one of you who are listening right now to this webinar has a maturity model, at least in one side of their business today. Let me give you one simple example. I am sure every company out there has some kind of a lead funnel, right, for the sales activity, right? You start with leads that you move into prospects that you try to convert into being customers, and you go through a certain process to qualify the leads, right? Do they have the right budget? Is there authority? What is the need, et cetera, et cetera? Essentially, if you think about it, you're assessing the maturity, right? The ability of that company to become your customer. The outcome of that qualification process is binary. The prospect is either qualified or not, right? Is it a qualified lead or isn't it a qualified lead? And the sales team is dealing with that from that point on. If you convert the terminology to maturity, you would say that the customer is either immature, not ready for us to focus on, or they are mature, in which case we would like to try to sell to them. That's the way sales people look at it. When it comes, however, into our domain in customer success, we need to look at our customers and continue the assessment of that maturity, that qualification to the next level, right? Below the line or left of the line, if you look at this chart here, right, the customers are immature, right? They require a lot of consulting, right? Assistance from us. It's not about the basic software, right? The use of the software is probably very basic, very minimal, which means that the amount of revenue we can get against the software is low. We can get some services revenue, but services revenue is expensive, and the outcome is gross margin is low, and the CAC ratio, which is the amount of time it takes you to return the investment, is very long, maybe even negative. The conclusion is, if this was on the sales side, we probably shouldn't have sold to them. Since we already have them as a customer, we may not want to even serve them. But it's valuable to assess the continuation, right? When it comes to our life in customer success, customers are not binary. They are ongoing, right? So we have low maturity, medium maturity, high maturity customers. And if you try to plot them on how much software revenue versus service revenue we can get, if you look on the low maturity customers, the customers probably require a lot of consulting to help their business. I'm not talking about deploying the software. I'm talking about helping them understand how to use it, what to do with it, how to evolve their processes internally in order to utilize our solution. Their software use is basic and sporadic. Software fees are low. Overall, we get low gross margin. As we move up the scale from low to medium to high maturity, we see that the need for consulting declines over time. The need for training on the software increases, the use of advanced features increase, and overall software fees can be increased. High maturity customers are the ones where we can extract the most value to us. Their need for services diminishes, the software usage is high, the pressure for advanced features increases, and the vendor, we, can now increase the software fees because the customer sees value and is therefore willing to pay more. This is the heart of the differentiation between the customer health score and the customer maturity. If you think about the customer health score, it's a measure of the relationship between the vendor and the customer. And it is aimed at assessing the health of those relations and predicting their future direction. Will this customer likely churn, renew as is, or expand the relationship and dollars with us? Customer Maturity Index, in contrast, measures the sophistication of the customer in running their function and consequently their ability to utilize and derive value from the vendor solution. Therefore, the Customer Maturity Index is aimed at identifying the actions that the vendor should take in order to address the customer needs.
Great. Now, Boaz, thank you. There's a comment here from Brandon that I thought I would bring up. He says, I'd argue that high maturity will actually still want consulting, as they will want to take it to the next level. That's what he's seen in his role. Do you have any thoughts about consulting in these high maturity organizations?
I think that's a great comment. The customer may want to improve, but doesn't necessarily need that in order to make good use of your solution. So now it becomes a question that you, the vendor, can take. Do you want to provide consulting, or do you want to be a software vendor? You can provide consulting via your own teams. You can provide partner relations and have partners that are focused on consulting to do their business. It's an easier decision because you already get the software revenue, which is what most software companies are about. At the lower end of the scale, you won't be able to get the software revenue without the consulting, which presents a challenge for the management to decide. So let me take this to the next level and see if I can drive the point forward and what people think about it. So if I were able to convince you guys that, yes, there is value in this concept of customer maturity, it is different from customer health score, then the next question you should probably ask yourself is, okay, so, hey, Boaz, wonderful concept. What do we do about it? How do we do it? Well, the bad news is that there is no cookie cutter approach to this. Just like the customer health score is specific to you and your company, so does the customer maturity index, if you want to develop one, need to be developed for your specific company based on your specific needs, right? The maturity of a company selling to salespeople should be structured differently than the maturity index for a company selling to developers or to retailers or to whomever else. But the good news is that drawing on the experience that's already out there in maturity models, Ralph and I have built a framework that we believe can be used by most companies out there, at least to get started. And the framework is the following. We believe that the maturity of an organization is a framework, a formula built on the following four categories. One is the charter of the organization. What is it aimed at doing? Is it clear? Is it comprehensive? Is it significant enough in the organization, measured by the title of the functional head? Does it represent well what they do? The second are the people, right? Is the team sophisticated? Is it adequately in size? Does it have a strong track record, etc.? Process is the third component, where we look at are the processes developed in high quality? Is there a knowledge management component that helps the process improve over time? And is there a lot of integration with other teams? So 1 + 1 = 3, as opposed to process in isolation for the specific function without interacting with others. And lastly, technology. Is there good use of tools? Is there good use of reports to measure what you do? Technology, after all, is a mechanism to improve the trajectory of a business, right? The cost efficiency of it. And is there complexity in the environment? Is technology an inhibitor to the function to do their job, or an added capability that helps it? We took that concept and we built a questionnaire out of it. And by the way, we have published all of this information for everybody out there. You can ping me online and I can point you to it, or you can just search for it. We actually created a set of Excel-based tools that anybody can download and use as a starting point for creating their own customer maturity index. But we have created essentially a questionnaire, right? The categories are on the left, the description in the middle. There's a description of what is low and what is high, and a mechanism to select on a 1 to 5 scale, where are you? Then you can essentially create a formula that calculates based on kind of a simple average within each category, what is the score for the category. In this scenario, for example, Charter got a score of 2.3, people got 4, etc. And then if you add weight, because for your business, you may decide that the weight of one of those characteristics is, should be higher or lower than others, you can create a score. In this situation, in this example, 2.4, you can plot it between 1 and 5 and get an assessment of, where it is. But that's not good enough, right? Because just the number, hey, you got a maturity index of 2.4, what does that mean? What you want to do next is contrast the customer maturity index that you just calculated with the customer health score. And this is where the real insights come to bear. Think about it. If you have a customer that has low maturity and low health score, you probably want to either churn them proactively, let them know that you don't want to serve them as a customer, cut the cord, or just let them churn on their own. If you did not have the customer maturity index in here, what you would have is a low health score customer. And the traditional thinking is, if you have a customer with a low health score, you should invest in them to increase their health score. What we are saying here is once you add the dimension of customer maturity, you can actually make decisions on those customers with low health score. Are they worth investing in? I would say that there is a big differentiation between low maturity and high maturity customers in the bucket of low health score. High maturity customers, people who are sophisticated in their business, but for whatever reason don't have good relations with you, are worth investing in saving because they can become good customers. They can become high gross margin customers. The low maturity ones, you need to fight two battles, both the maturity fight and the health score fight, and you may not want to do that. High customer maturity index and high customer health score, those are the ones you want to focus on expansion, selling more, and leverage. These are the ones you want on case studies. These are the ones you want in your webinars. These are the ones you want on billboards to talk about your story, because the high customer maturity companies are the ones that out there in the industry, people respect, people look to see what are they doing, how are they utilizing technologies, which vendors are they using. They are the ones people like to imitate, which again is very different from high health score, low maturity customers. These are people that for whatever reason, maybe the right reasons, they like you, they use you, but are not very sophisticated in their shops. They don't have the greatest processes. You should focus on retaining them. If you try to move them to buy more and do more, they may not be able to do that without the need for more services, which goes back to the question, Brent, that you raised before, which is, how do I do that? Do I want services or not? That's a question that every software company has, every software company should have. But the answer to that depends, right? Some companies like to be just software. That's where the high gross margin is. And they want the services to be provided by somebody else. They strike relations with partners and other entities out there, consulting companies of different kinds, to provide services, and they provide the software. Other companies like to create software and services solutions combined, but that's a big investment that requires the management decision-making on. Let me give you an example, right? Ralph at ProMap did exactly that. ProMap is a software to manage process maps based out of New Zealand with customers all over the world. When Ralph got in by the end of 2015, he discovered a kind of leaky bucket with over 10% of the customers and the revenue churning. He went through a process of interviewing customers and highlight the value of the customer. And then he created a framework for a preliminary customer maturity index, because he figured out that the customer health score that they already had at the time didn't give him the right insight. what the health score look like is a preliminary questionnaire, not very different from what we talked before, with questions and numbering scheme, and then plotted it on a spider web diagram, the red indicating where the customer situation is today, the green is the assessment of the people at ProMap of where the customer can get to within a couple of quarters, which is a reasonable amount of time for them to act. And based on that, they plotted all of their customers and figure out that, about half their customers are in the high and high, very happy and should expand their businesses. Another 9% or so are at the high risk that maybe should be let go, not because we don't like them, but because we acknowledge that there are only so many hours in the day, there are only so many people available to do work, only so many resources available. Where should we invest those resources? Those 9% of revenue was not worth the amount of investment needed to retain and expand, and the ROI was higher to reallocate the investment into the other buckets. They have decided, and this is interesting, they have decided to develop a consulting process in order to help the high customer health score, low maturity companies to grow their business, improve how they work, so they can have better way of utilizing the ProMap solutions. They had specific success plays articulated for every one of these segments. This is one example on the high and high segment and kind of the success plays that we're aiming for. And within a year of work, we're able to reduce the churn quite dramatically to 2.2%, which I think everybody would acknowledge is a fantastic statistics. They've also simplified their CMI framework and designed more customer survey, and they're looking at additional ways to push this framework forward. So overall, if I were to summarize, your customer health score is needed, right? Any company that is doing customer success, any heads of customer success should have a customer health score. However, the customer health score in and on itself, as a measure of the relationship between the vendor and the customer, may not be sufficient. If you add customer maturity index and contrast the two metrics at one another, you may get the clarity that you need in order to figure out what should be the next step, what should you do with the specific customers, and elevate the way you run your shop.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you. We have several good questions here, and of course, a lot of people asking for some of the resources that you mentioned. So we will make those available after the webinar here. And one of the first questions, Boaz, if it's okay, that I'd like to pose to you is regarding the CMI and the depth of understanding of the customer. It does require quite a bit of information about the customer. Kathy asks, how can we discover this level of information about our customers without being too intrusive?
That's a good question. Let me even expand further. The concept that we have developed here so far in the questionnaire and the level of depth that we need to understand customers is probably appropriate for high-touch customers, won't be cost-effective for low-touch, not to mention tech-touch type customers, right? If you have thousands of customers, you won't be able to easily utilize the framework we have developed here to capture the information. If you have dozens or hundreds of customers, you probably should invest in that level. And the way to do it is via the customer success managers and their interaction with the customer. What we do, what ProMap did, is they started by looking at what the salespeople have captured, maybe add a couple of more fields into Salesforce to capture the kind of insights that the salespeople have into the customers from the sales cycle. How large is their team? What other tools do they use? Do they feel like they have a track record of success, etc.? And they build on that within the customer success team during the initial deployment and then on an ongoing basis to get more and more depth of information. I would suggest that this is one of those areas where you should not let great be the enemy of good. You should start with where you can and add value and insight and depth over time. A partial answer is better than no answer. A partial metric is better than no metric. So do what you can and expand. I also can say that Ralph at ProMap actually even experimented with a survey to the customers. So they actually developed a survey that they sent customers to solicit some of this information that they then plugged into their maturity model to be even more sophisticated and leverage the customers in understanding where customers are. This obviously requires a little bit more of interaction with customers and explain to them what we are after, etc. But I thought it's a very collaborative way between a vendor and a customer that I think is fantastic if you can make it happen.
That's great. And here at ClientSuccess, we collect pieces of this information, starting with marketing engagements and sales engagements. And one of the key tricks for us has been figuring out how to pass all that information along to the customer success team. And so it is possible and can also be collected at different points in the customer or prospect lifecycle. Excellent. Well, another question here from Jeremy, who asked, can you elaborate on the type of actions one would take based on the level of maturity of your customers?
Yes.
How different would those actions be?
Yeah, so if you look at this chart, I think the success plays here should be very different. Let me give you an example. If we look at low customer maturity, high customer health score, you have a set of customers that, like you, they're likely to renew, they use your solution, you have good relations with them, but their shops are not very sophisticated, or they're lacking in resources to get things done. If you wanted to expand the business with them, almost the only way to do that is to invest in management consulting type support to help those customers improve their maturity so they can utilize more of your software. Now the question is, do you want to do that? Many companies, at Mashry we did that, ProMap, just here as an example, did that. At OpenGov right now, where I am, we're building that function right now to provide additional management consulting services. Many companies refer to it as strategy services or consulting services outside the deployment of the solution, outside the training of how to use the solution. I'm talking about services to help the customer do their job better, right? Almost regardless of our solution. That's a decision that the company needs to take if they want to move those companies from a retain right to the right towards expand and leverage. In expand and leverage, right, high maturity, high health score, these are the ones that we want to sell more software to. These are the ones that can be your advocates in front of other vendors. These are the ones that would ask for referrals. These are the ones that would ask for references. These are the ones that would build case studies with, right? I mean, think about it. What kind of a case study do you want to read when you're evaluating the use of another vendor? Do you want to read a case study from a company that you value as very innovative and thought leading, or do you want to read a case study from a company that you don't have a strong appreciation for? Well, the answer is pretty clear. So if your marketing team is going after case study with companies that are in the low maturity, high health score, just because you have good relations with them, you're probably misusing the marketing resources. You will get the case study because the company is happy and will tell good things about you, but no one will appreciate that case study, and that's a waste of a resource. Is that a good explanation?
Yeah, I think that's great. I've got two more questions here that I'd like to get to. Nils asks, how often should you revisit the questions for the CMI for each customer?
Wonderful question. I would say as frequent as you can with respect to two vectors. One, how hard it is to collect the information. The harder it is to collect the information, the less frequent you want to do it because it takes effort away from doing other work. The second vector is how frequently do things change, right? And that really depends on your business, right? Some of you are working in very fast-changing businesses where the customer situation changes very rapidly, and others work in slower cycle industries where the situation doesn't change very quickly, and therefore, measuring annually is completely sufficient, right? Others may find the need to measure on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, right? It's hard to give a full answer to this, but I would say just like performance reviews that you do with your people or any other assessment, right? You want to do as much of it as possible as long as it doesn't take too much resource from doing other work.
Great. And I'm going to paraphrase Lindsay's question here. She asks, how do you use the CMI in board discussions?
Wow, I like that question. One of the people that I know have used this framework early on. A guy who took the job of head of customer success at a small software company, about 70 people, about a year ago, told me that he plotted the 40 or 50 customers. They're on a very high touch model, so few customers paying a lot of money each. He plotted his customers on these two dimensions together with the ARR they get, right, the software revenue they get from them, and was an eye-opening discussion with the board and the sales team about we are not necessarily focusing the sales team on the right segments. We have too many in the low maturity customer area, which means that it will be harder for us to serve and grow. He also used this assessment to get the board agreement to plow additional money into the company to build a consulting business, because it's an early phase company. They need to coach customers and grow them into the place where they can use the solutions, and they needed to raise more money in order to do that. And he was able to use this framework in order to justify, or in part, right, to justify the recommendation to build a new team in the company to provide that level of service.
Excellent. Excellent. Great example. Well, a couple of other things here to those who are listening. If you like this kind of content and you are a customer success leader, we'd invite you to consider joining the CS100 Summit, where each year you'll see the Innovator of the Year competition and award presented. Look for later this year an invitation to participate yourself. So we will make available a submission form where you can participate and submit your innovation to the Innovator of the Year award. Boaz, do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
Yes. One last comment. Like I said in the beginning, this is a effort that Ralph and I started, and by now has attracted about a half a dozen other people who are contributing material to this concept. We've tracked about 23 different blog posts related to this and a number of presentations and sessions. I would urge anybody who is interested in this to read the blog posts. You can find them on my LinkedIn page, and then contribute to it. Write your own blog post with respect to it. Help us develop the methodology further. A bunch of us, Ralph and I, and a bunch of other people, Nicole Paradise, Ellen Wu, a number of other people, are now working on a V2 of the CMI with a number of areas that we want to expand into. One of them is how can we do an effective CMI framework for low-touch customers that cannot invest. The CS team cannot invest in the high-touch level of effort that is maybe required here to understand the customer maturity. or how do we tie the CMI into other elements in the company tracking and metrics. So there's a lot of work that is being done, all voluntarily, of course, right? None of us make money of it. We just feel like it's good, interesting way of supporting the customer success community. And we'd like to hear as many of the innovations that are happening out there from any of you here on the line or others.
Wonderful. That's a great, great invitation. And for anyone who is interested, contact myself or Boaz directly, and I'll be happy to connect you with Boaz as well. So thank you very much. As we mentioned previously, a recorded version of this webinar will be emailed to you, and ClientSuccess is here to help. We are incredibly passionate about helping you deliver value for customers through customer success processes. Because of our passion, we've built industry-leading technology to help you, and we have many other resources available. I'd highly recommend visiting the ClientSuccess blog, as well as some other resources that have been posted here in the chat window. Many of them are from Boaz directly. Boaz, thank you to all of our attendees. We thank you for joining us, and we will talk to you again next month.
Thank you very much, Brent.